So originally I was going to talk about my sourdough. I've been spending a lot of time reading up on sourdough, watching videos, testing it. My tests haven't gone so well. So I'm really excited because today, for the first time, my sourdough starter has actually grown. I'm almost at double, which means that I can bake bread today. I have about another hour to go, but I'm about to start the autolyse process, which is putting the flour and water together and letting it sit to build up gluten. And then I'll fold in the sourdough starter and start folding to create air bubbles. And then we let it sit and rise and punch it back down and braid it and all sorts of things. And I'll be doing that later on today, but I just wanted to kind of give you a start of what's happening. So I fed it this morning at 8 a.m. I poured out everything but 2 ounces, added 2 ounces of flour, 2 ounces of water, put the rubber band on there so I could watch the growth process. And like I said, I'm about another centimeter off of being doubled. And I don't throw any of this out. I just poured into this other container here. So I kind of essentially have 2 things of sourdough starter going, and I could take some of this out, feed it, and get a whole nother thing of bread going. But like I said, I don't throw it out, I use it. So the other day I just used this as itself, put some scallions on there, fried it up. That was delicious. Last night I made pizza dough and added this in there, so we had sourdough pizza dough. And I'll add some pictures of that coming up. So this is great. Yeah, you can use it for all sorts of things, so don't throw it out. Talking about not throwing anything out either. So on all my tests, I've had, let's see, so far, 2 loaves of bread and pizza dough. The 2 loaves of bread didn't turn out so well. They were baked well, baked all the way through. The crumb was really nice, but they just didn't rise. They were flat as a pancake, so big. But, they tasted really good, but they just couldn't do anything with them, sandwiches or anything. So I cut them up, diced them, tossed them with some olive oil, garlic salt, and some Parmesan, and roasted them in the oven for about 30 to 45 minutes and tossing them every now and then in the oven so they browned up on all the sides. Croutons, delicious. Oh my God, they're so good. All right. So here's the sourdough recipe. I did it all in grams. It's easiest to weigh everything out. I mixed the flour and the water together in the autolyse process, and I let it sit there for roughly a couple hours before I started mixing in the salt and then the sourdough starter. So I'm speeding up all of these. I'm showing everything that I've done, and I'll just speed up the videos as I go so that you're not bored. But the main thing I found is to fold everything in. To stretch and fold, stretch and fold. So here I'm just adding the starter. Just weighing it out, 150 grams of starter into that autolyse flour and water. Just mixing it up, folding it in. That's what creates all the air bubbles. So the starter is your yeast. You don't have to add any yeast to it. Your bread will grow with that. Just fold it in. And then you're just going to let this sit. I let it sit for it's a half hour. And then for the next 3 hours, every 30 minutes, I would fold it, stretch and fold, adding air into the dough before the bulk rise. So here I'm feeding the starter. So after I poured it in, I stretched and folded the dough. I fed the starter again. So after I had fed it, it grew again. And if I wanted to bake another loaf of bread, or 2 loaves actually. This recipe gets you 2 loaves. I could have used this again after about 3 or 4 hours. So it's real important to constantly feed your starter. And if you're not going to feed it, put it in the refrigerator. So I fed mine here, covered it back up with the cap, and put it in the refrigerator. And if I'm not going to bake bread for another week or so, I'll take it out in about 4 or 5 days and I'll feed it again, put it back in the refrigerator. When I know that I'm going to bake bread again, I'll take it out a few days ahead of time and start feeding it morning and night to really get it going, to get it active again. So there was one of the stretch and folds covered up with the saran wrap, and 30 minutes elapsed, and here I go again. Now you can do this with your hands, but it's really sticky. It works better using, here I'm just using a silicone spatula. If this was out of my counter, I could have used a counter scrape, but I find it easier to use a tool. So after your dough has done its bulk rise, you've let it stretch and fold for a couple hours, and then you've let it doubled in size. You're going to form your loaves. So this is your pre-shape. I'm taking the dough out. I'm working it with the counter scrape. I'm dividing it up into 2 loaves here. And I'm gonna take it and kind of stretch it apart. I don't want to flatten it out completely. I want to leave as much air in there as possible. And I'm kind of braiding it. I'm folding the sides in and then rolling it up on itself and tucking the ends underneath it. And we're just going to let these sit here for about another 10 minutes or so. Actually, I take that back. We're going to let it sit here for about 30 minutes. So after they've sat there for 30 minutes, we're going to do one more final shaping. And we're tucking everything back under, making it real tight. And I'm putting it in the flour lined bread loaf. I don't have rising pans, so I just used stainless steel pans, put a tea cloth in them, and put tons of flour. We're doing the proofing now in the oven. Set it to proof. Took them out after, I think it was about 45 minutes or so. We're cutting the top so that it has room to expand when it rises in the oven, and I put it on parchment. So now when you put it in the proofing baskets, or in my case the stainless steel pans lined with the tea cloths, you want it seam side up, because when you put it on the parchment paper, you're going to dump it out seam side down, which will give you a nice beautiful loaf. So I put it in my cast iron pan for 20 minutes with the lid on. That creates steam and the rise. And then for another roughly 30 minutes afterwards for the final bake. Now, I would have left this in the oven, turned the oven off, cracked the door, and left the oven, let it sit in there to cure a little bit longer. But as you can see, I cooked it a little too long. It burnt a little on the bottom. So you don't want to do that. Don't go by your times. Look at your oven. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe.